Well, it is cold, so many people expect higher heating bills, but many are hot after seeing their bills.
That's because their electric bills went up by hundreds of dollars. 8 on Your Side consumer reporter Brian Roach takes a look at what's been going on.
Shock, extreme shock. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a mistake.
Just about any homeowner would agree with Charlotte Meyer. Who wouldn't think this electric bill was a mistake?
The maximum ever was probably $240. And this went to $935. Yes, I was shocked.
Charlotte examined the bill and learned that in December she was charged 11 cents per kilowatt hour by the alternative electric supplier she switched to more than a year ago. In January, it jumped to 29 cents per kilowatt hour.
In my opinion, it is gouging.
In fact, what it is a variable electric rate that some electric suppliers offer. The Public Utility Commission is hearing from a lot of consumers about this.
We're getting a lot of complaints from consumers. We had over 175 in just 1 week from consumers about high bills and concerns about what is going on with the variable rates.
Jen Coker with the PUC says it's getting complaints from consumers about a half a dozen electric suppliers with variable rates that have jumped to nearly 30 cents a kilowatt hour. Is there any limit on what variable can be?
There is not. We do not have that type of controls on the variable limits.
While the PUC says it can do little about the rates right now, it can examine the way these electric suppliers are doing business.
What we can do is look at the marketing practices that they employed in order to get people to sign up for that rate.
Charlotte Meyer has already filed a complaint with the PUC about her bill, and she's already taking steps to get a different electric supplier.
And I will definitely go with a fixed rate rather than a variable rate of the cost per kilowatt hour.
Now, it's expected that everyone's electric bill is going to go up by about 30% compared to the same time last year, only because of this nasty cold weather we've been having. But if you've seen your bill spike because of a variable rate, the PUC says it still wants to hear from you. Call the PUC at 1-800-692-7380 to file a complaint. We have also set up a link to file a complaint on their website at WGAL.com. Shopping for electricity is still very confusing for a lot of people. Remember, you do not have to switch suppliers, but you've got to watch what's being put in front of you. Don't fall for the rate that's introductory. It's really nice for a couple of months. That's what seems to happen with a lot of them here. And really take a good hard look at variable versus fixed rate. We're going to be covering this story, I think, for a couple of days now.
They're really learning the lesson the hard way, aren't they?
Yes, read the fine print.
Thank you, Brian. Getting tough on power companies. The message to them: if you violated the rules with skyrocketing rates, you could lose your license. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Lemon.
And I'm Ron Martin. This is a story many of you are talking about after receiving your latest utility bill. Many of you are now taking your complaints to the Public Utility Commission. As 8 on Your Side consumer reporter Brian Roach explains, the PUC is listening.
The first matter on this morning's public meeting agenda is
Usually meetings of the Public Utility Commission don't get a lot of attention.
we recognize as an agency we have to do more.
But that all changed on Thursday because of the hundreds of electric customers who have already complained to the PUC about the high variable electric rates charged by their electric generation supplier. Those suppliers were put on notice.
And let me remind those suppliers here this morning that if those informal complaints go formal, we will not hesitate to revoke your license.
The PUC once again stated that it doesn't have jurisdiction over the prices that electric generation suppliers, or EGSs, are charging. But it can crack down on the deals those EGSs are making with customers.
It appears that in some customer contracts had no ceiling on the variable rate that could be charged by EGSs.
The PUC says it will now consider the possibility of variable rate caps while it examines customer contracts.
If there is a circumstance where suppliers are operating outside those disclosure statements and outside those contracts, there will be decisive action from the Commission.
And those suppliers that are not playing by the rule will not be doing business here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Customers trying to quickly get away from variable rate contracts are finding out that they often can't switch companies for at least 30 days.
Our electric distribution companies who are in the room today, you own part of this problem, and you know it. It's this 16 to 30-day switching requirement, and it needs to be changed.
As of late this afternoon, the PUC tells me it has received close to 800 complaints from consumers about the high variable electric rates. The highest numbers in the state have come from here in the Susquehanna Valley, more than 230. Those complaints are proving to be very valuable for the PUC and the two other state agencies looking into these bills. So if you have not yet complained about your high variable rate bill, that is absolutely the best thing you can do right now as a consumer. We still have the links and phone numbers for all three agencies on WGAL.com. And Kim and Ron, the best thing to come out of this, it has created a great deal of public awareness about their electric bill. I've heard from a lot of viewers who are calling me saying, I'm checking my bill, I'm not affected, but at least I'm paying attention to it. And a lot of people asking questions, who's to blame here? Well, we'll get to that down the road, but right now the best thing you can do, file a complaint if you've been affected.
Sounds like we could see some changes as a result of this.
The way the commissioners were talking today, changes are on the table.
All right. Thank you, Brian. The 8 on Your Side team staying on top of the skyrocketing electric bill story. Now, some customers are fighting back, and a growing number are getting rebate checks to help pay those bills.
A Susquehanna Valley man refused to take no for an answer and now has a refund check in hand. Consumer reporter Brian Roach has his story.
Dan Jerchaw was not a happy man when he went to his mailbox last month and found his $924 electric bill.
My bill went up 305%.
Dan saw that he was being charged more than 24 cents per kilowatt hour. Within minutes, he was on the phone with the electric supplier that he switched to last summer, Pennsylvania Gas and Electric.
And I am not going to sit down and take this. I'm going to call the PUC. I'm going to call the State Attorney General's office. And I said, I'm going to call Brian Roach at WGAL. That's what I told him.
Dan says he channeled his anger into his keyboard, sending emails and complaints to News 8, the Public Utility Commission, and the State Attorney General. He also wrote to Pennsylvania Gas and Electric, making it clear to them that he was not paying the $924 bill in full.
The total amount I'm paying is $411.65 until the PUC advises me otherwise. Your business practices amount to nothing more than a scam called a bait and switch.
Within 2 weeks of that letter, Dan got a phone call from PG&E asking him if he would accept a settlement of $513, the portion of the bill that he did not pay, and a rate of about 9 cents per kilowatt hour.
And I said, now that's a settlement. I will be happy with that.
And when Dan went to his mailbox on Tuesday, he found his check.
In the amount of $513. And there's my check.
Dan will now use this check to pay the rest of his electric bill, which he is legally obligated to do. Dan tells me he is happy about his deal. He's not happy that other consumers are still waiting for money or an explanation.
Be tenacious. Every time you talk to somebody, get their name, write down the time, the date, get a PUC case number. Use that case number in every letter that you write.
Now, of course, we're very happy for Dan and glad that News 8 could play a small role in him getting a rebate. But unfortunately, at this time, there is no one-size-fits-all solution for everyone to get a rebate. You need to pick up the phone, you need to make the calls, and you need to write those letters as Dan did until you get satisfaction. For lack of a better term, there is kind of a every man and woman for him or herself right now mentality. Dan tells me that, listen to this, once he agreed to the settlement with PG&E, the company then asked, would you please stay on as a customer? Dan said no thank you. He says he's only going to sign on now with companies that have fixed rate contracts, no cancellation fees.
Hey, don't mess with Dan.
No, we need him on our team.
He's
Yes.
tenacious. That's the word he used.
Good advice. All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Brian.
Welcome back to News 8 at 6. The 8 on Your Side team continuing to help you deal with those skyrocketing electric bills. Many of you are still working to get your money back.
Consumer reporter Brian Roach spoke with an Adams County woman who's telling everyone not to give up the fight.
Margie Lindsley is a retired school teacher with a problem.
My electric bill is $1,410.
And for the last few weeks, the teacher has become the student.
In education, we always say you learn by doing. And that is, I learned how to navigate all of this.
All of this is trying to deal with an electric bill that increased nearly 500% in 1 month because of a variable electric rate.
Well, I prayed that it was a mistake. I couldn't believe the numbers. So I immediately went to the telephone. This is Margie Lindsley calling from
Margie says she's been spending hours on the phone every day trying to reach someone at Pennsylvania Gas and Electric, her electric supplier.
Off and on, I bet, could be 3 or 4 hours.
Also calling the Public Utility Commission and the Attorney General's office.
I'm a retired school teacher, and I can do this.
Margie tells me, though, she's deeply worried about people who don't have the time or the ability to fight these high electric bills and the time to stay on hold asking for a rebate.
What about the elderly? in Pennsylvania? What about the people who have little children? My fear is who's going to have their power turned off?
As Margie continues to fight for a rebate on her own bill, she wants to urge others, don't give up.
I feel like I'm as passionate about this for all the other Pennsylvanians as I am for my own bill.
Tonight, we can only echo Margie's message, do not give up. This is a unique consumer situation, the likes of which I've never seen before. Right now, you will only get what you fight for. The state may end up taking action against these electric suppliers, but that may be months down the road. Maybe consumers in the end may get some money, but in the meantime, you've got to remain persistent here. You've got to keep making these phone calls, call those suppliers. If you can't get through to them after a week, call the PUC and tell them they're not responding to you. We still have all of those numbers, the contact information for all the 3 major state agencies on our website, WGAL.com.
All righty.
Thank you,
Good
Brian.
information. Thanks, Brian.
The historically cold winter weather that we had and the high electric bills are still being talked about, even as spring starts to warm us up. And today, lawmakers in Harrisburg learned that bills could be impacted well into the summer.
So they're in danger of being terminated.
Customers are in danger of being terminated.
A pretty ominous message at this hearing of the Senate Consumer Protection Committee in Harrisburg Tuesday. Senators heard stories about customers who only learned about the high variable rates they were paying after their bills arrived.
That would be like pulling into a gas station, filling the tank, and then finding out 30 days later that you filled your tank for $12 a gallon rather than the $3 to $4 you expected.
Several electric retailers also testified, saying they'll do everything they can to avoid shutting off electric service, but for some customers, it will be inevitable. Also inevitable are price hikes for customers that return to default suppliers like PPL and Med-Ed.
Our default service customers will see increases that range from about 4% to about 12% in June to cover the difference.
To make up that difference, last week First Energy Solutions started sending out these postcards notifying its fixed-rate customers that they'll be hit with a $5 to $15 surcharge. The state's Public Utility Commission says it'll be investigating the surcharge to see if it's legal.
It's understandable. Like I said, it's an unprecedented event of what happened in January, so it's understandable that there's plenty of questions surrounding this.
There's also a lot of questions about a proposal from the Public Utility Commission to allow customers to switch away from high electric rates in 3 to 5 days instead of 40.
It'll actually force suppliers to work harder to keep their customers. They're going to have to, if a customer can leave you, within a few days' notice, you really have to make sure you've got the best products in the market and the best prices in the market to keep those customers with you.
And if those accelerated switch times become reality, the burden would then fall on the default suppliers like PPL, Med-Ed, and PECO. Today, a PPL representative said the cost for changing from the current switching system would range anywhere from a few million to $100 million.
Good evening. I'm Ron Martin.
And I'm Kim Lemon. Last winter will be remembered for the relentless cold and the high electric bills.
8 on your side consumer reporter Brian Roach shows you what you can do right now to save money.
Thank you, Joe. Well, it is cold, so many people expect higher heating bills, but many are hot after seeing their bills.
For more than 6 weeks this past winter,
My bill went up 305%.
the 8 on your side team told you about high electric bills spawned by the polar vortex. Tracy Griffith saw those stories, but she didn't worry. At the time, she had a fixed electric rate.
Yes, I did. And I was very thankful that I didn't have the variable rate plan.
But that changed for her a few weeks ago when her electric rate became a variable rate.
It jumped to 11.99 cents. And lastly, on the next month, it jumped to 15.99 cents.
She wasn't going into this coming winter at that price, so she went shopping quickly and cut her rate in half.
It is 8.2 cents per kilowatt hour. I checked a couple things. I made sure it was fixed rate and not variable, and no cancellation fee, no monthly fee.
What Tracy did is what you need to do before another polar vortex frosts your bank account this winter. The state has made some changes to protect consumers from what happened last year, but the best thing you can do is to review your bill now.
That's a portion of your bill.
Gladys Brown is one of the 5 commissioners on the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, and she showed us what to look for.
Supplier information is the top left of the bill.
The supplier is the company generating your electricity.
In this bill, in any bill you see, your generation charge is going to be the biggest part of your bill.
And the good news is that is the one part of your bill that you can shop for. Examine your bill and determine exactly what you're paying for a kilowatt hour of electricity.
Identify it with a kilowatt hour 0.64, which is excellent.
If you're paying more than 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you should be shopping. Head to papowerswitch.com. Click on Shop for Electricity, enter your zip code, and you're shopping. At the top of the page, highlighted in blue, you'll see the price of your default supplier. You can stick with that price if you want, or scroll down, find a better rate, and switch suppliers.
We want to emphasize that if you're currently under a contract with a more expensive supplier, you may have to pay a small fine to switch. So check that out first. But most importantly, know what kind of rate you have. Is it a fixed rate or a variable rate? If you remember, the variable rate plans are what led to those huge electric bills that we talked about almost all last winter. Some of those rate plans jumped up to 30, 40, and 50 cents a kilowatt hour, leading to those $1,000 bills. And the PUC, almost a year later, is still investigating many of these cases. Switch now, save yourself some money.
Will do.
Thank you, Brian.